So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for our second Utility Accelerator Coalition workshop. Today's topic is case studies, best practices, and unique problem solving. My name is Jessica. Today we have some great guest speakers joining us who are going to provide a bit more experience and information on how benchmarking applies in practice, benchmarking practices apply in real life, kind of bringing some of what we've been talking to off paper, seeing how that looks in practice today. So we'll go through introductions briefly for our guest speakers, give a quick overview of the utility requirements we discussed in our last workshop, and then I'm going to introduce our first guest speaker and kind of let our three guest speakers go through discussing what they have to share with you. And then we'll go through our upcoming workshop schedule into Q&A. We do have a lot of information to get through today. Like I said, we do have three guest speakers joining us. Kirk with Fort Collins Utilities, Emma with CenterPoint Energy, and Tyler from Xcel Energy will all be sharing with you today. So I would like us all to hold questions until the end if possible. Feel free to throw them in the chat, jot them down, but just given that we've set it up to have around 30 minutes of Q&A at the end. Want to make sure we have enough time to answer everybody's questions. So keep track of those. Let us know if you have anything pertinent we need to address right away, but if we could all save them to the end, that would be great. So first, I just wanted to do a quick touch on the requirements for utility companies based off of the requirements outlined in the bill, just so we all have a base for what we're going to be hearing a little bit more about today. The bill stipulates two different types of utilities, classifications, qualifying utilities and non-qualifying utilities. The main difference between the two is the way in which a utility company is going to be required to take requests for data from their owners and their customers. So essentially, a qualifying utility is going to have an online portal where owners can request data, and non-qualifying utilities will not be required to implement this through an online portal. They can take it through email, through call requests. Today, I'm hoping to provide a better understanding of the whole process as it stands in terms of what current utilities are doing to provide services to their customers for benchmarking. It may make sense, even as a non-qualifying utility, to go an automated route for some of these things, maybe a portal for accepting data requests, just based on the amount and volume of requests you'll be receiving. So today I'm hoping to just provide a bit more information that can help you decide what's best for you. The bill outlines requirements, but none of them are specific in terms of how it ends up being implemented in practice, given that all utilities are starting in a different place and they all have different systems. They'll all kind of have their own ability to figure out the best way to implement these requirements overall. So regardless of size, utility companies in Colorado will be able to must provide easily accessible aggregated data to customers within 30 days of that request, adopt an aggregation threshold that is no more than 4, and right now there's talk going on about revising some of the language for that aggregation threshold. I know in our past discussions, we've had talks on tenant versus account and things like that. So they're working on adjusting that language to be more appropriate, but I imagine that it will still stand as no more than 4. And they'll also have to manage consent, privacy, and authorization forms. So as an overview of options and what we'll be seeing hashed out a bit more in our guest speakers discussions today, there's essentially a range of options we can use to implement these requirements on a utility company level. There's a spreadsheet option where owners can be given a spreadsheet of their previous year's utility data that they can then manually upload themselves into their benchmarking account. Energy Star Portfolio Manager typically would be the one they're using. Auto upload would be another option for utility companies to pursue. This would be where the customer is a little bit less involved. The utility company is going to set up some sort of system with connecting with Portfolio Manager, we'll dig into this a bit more in our next workshop. in order to transfer that data into their customer's benchmarking portal, as well as a customer interface that kind of integrates the auto upload system into a more robust customer interface that can include viewing bills and managing other aspects of their utility accounts. So right now I'm going to introduce our first guest speaker and pull up, switch over to their PowerPoint here. And our first guest speaker today is Kirk with Fort Collins Utilities. Kirk, are you with us? I got you here.
I am with us.
All right, great. Can't see anybody's face right now. All righty. So I'll pull up your PowerPoint right now. Let me know if you'll need anything else from me. So here we go.
Are you going to advance through these, I'm assuming?
Yep, I'll slide through them.
Okay. Sorry, my slides aren't very pretty, a little content heavy, but hopefully Jessica can share these out with folks after the fact. So as Jessica mentioned, my name is Kirk Longstein. I work with Fort Collins Utilities. We're a municipal utility here in northern Colorado along the Front Range, and we provide electric, water, stormwater, wastewater, and we are also offering broadband utility as well. So I work in our energy services department, which is housed under our customer connections, which is primarily customer service. Our division, our energy services division, supports our energy savings goals as a utility. We also support our climate action, carbon reduction strategies related to energy savings in buildings primarily. But we're also supporting transportation and things like that. So Jessica asked me to kind of present here. We've been managing a benchmarking ordinance that was adopted in 2018. And there was a lot of scrambling to figure out how the utilities will support these building owners in getting utilities data. So we started this process maybe in 2017, a year before the ordinance was adopted, and we're constantly in a continuous improvement process. But the story that I want to tell today kind of goes back to 2017 and kind of where we started and how did we even begin thinking about going down this process. So I just want to share a little bit about kind of the project charter process and what was our business case. We had a lot of conversations around utility benefits, and then some of the key policy considerations that we really racked our head around. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is kind of the organizational development, organizational management around getting a team together to address some of these challenges. So I won't talk about our portal specifically, but happy to do so after the fact. Next slide. So we start with our customer connections or our customer service priorities. And in 2017, 2018, we really set out as a utility to address more digital engagement. We're hearing digital engagement as being a need from our customers specifically. And so we're currently underway in updating our billing system to provide a little bit more digital access, web access, having more functionality from the customer. We recently launched our My Energy and My Water portal, which are both similar to the O-Power model, but also allow customers access to a green button download. Green button is just a standardized format for getting data. But we also provide individual customers to log in and have access to their interval data. So having these formalized tools or having formalized processes to empower our customers to go in and check their utilities data, monitor their own kind of usage and understand where their bills are at and where they're at with their bills. That's kind of the direction that we've been going in for the last couple of years, and we're continuing to improve. And so along that same pathway was also looking at how do we engage with our trade base and our trade allies, participating solar contractors, third parties, and other folks that are supporting our energy efficiency goals. How do we engage with them in this process? Aside from a customer giving their username and password to a contractor, how can we engage with our contractors and other third parties to kind of engage with this energy management process? So next slide. So I'll say we, as a small utility, we didn't really have a formalized process for facilitating third-party data requests. And so anecdotally, what was happening was the contractor was in the room with the customer, telling the customer, call the utility, ask for the data, and then tell them to give it to us. And so that really kind of presented this challenge of how do we authenticate, how do we verify, all of these other data privacy questions kind of come to light when we have this kind of situation where, you know, people are just reversing the phone hangers and saying, here, give this person my data. And as a utility, we really kind of racked our head around that. Is that the best process? Also, we really didn't have a standardized format for what data wanted. We didn't really know what type of data was going to be useful for these contractors or for these third parties. And so it was always a conversation of what data do you want? And then going back to our management team and saying, can we release this data? Is this data able to be released under the existing policies? So having that ambiguous or subjective review kind of put individual staff members kind of in a tough position, trying to make those individual kind of decisions while also keeping the business going, keeping the customer satisfied, and also not slowing progress from our trade allies, and maintaining relationships within our service territory. And so we don't want to burden the customer, but also we want to maintain data privacy standards and maintain the integrity as the custodian of the data that we're holding for our customers. So some of the key kind of organizational questions as you go along this journey is, how are you currently handling data requests? And is there any sort of process improvements within that existing program for how you're handling data requests? And potentially that's a really great place to start, especially as it relates to consent. I know a lot of smaller utilities do not have a consent management process or program. And so this could be a great place to start. And then also record keeping. I know sometimes, you know, people's ears kind of perk up around record keeping, but when we first started along this journey and asking folks, you know, what was the level of customer requests that we are currently getting for data, there was a lot of question marks. We don't know. We don't have, you know, basic information on who is requesting the data, what type of data they're requesting, and where is the data being sent to, which presents a number of risk for the organization as it relates to cybersecurity and also protecting customer data and customer privacy along the way. So next slide. So we put together a project charter team, and you know, when the Red Flags Act was first passed in 2008, our organization established a data privacy committee, which was a cross-functional committee with utilities, HR, police, all these different people kind of at the table to kind of evaluate our risk as it relates to data privacy and meeting those red flags requirements as an organization. So as a part of our team, as this team, you know, we started to present ourselves with some of these questions and look through process improvement. And these are some of the benefits that we identified as a part of addressing this larger business case. You know, ensuring data privacy and compliance, having that tracking record, being able to reconcile where we are sending our data to whom, from whom. Reducing the customer burden is always our goal as a utility. We want our customers to have a seamless experience. We want to meet them at the median that they want to be met at. Contractor quality assurance and working with our trade ally groups, we want our contractors to be empowered to support our programs as best we can. And so we want our contractors to be out there hitting the ground, getting as many bids as they can, promoting our rebates as much as they can. And so how can we remove those barriers for those third parties? And hopefully having improved program outcomes. And then as a result, we track on an annual basis a customer survey. And so we'll be tracking metrics through that annual customer survey as it relates to these 3 bullet points here. So those are specific questions that show up on the survey. So look forward to reporting back to see if these tools are helping folks in meeting their expectations. So next slide. So some of the policy considerations, and this can be a dark, twisty path and a slippery slope for sure. And if I'm missing any policies here at a state level, I'd really encourage folks to reach out to me and let us know if there's other considerations that we need to be looking at. But the Colorado Open Records Act and the Red Flags Act are some of our kind of, guiding principles outside of our organization. We have a number of administrative policies and codes that have been adopted by our city council, but these are kind of, the boundaries that we're playing in here. We have, so across the top of this, this matrix here, I tried to highlight, these are our customers as we see it, and these are the folks that are requesting data. And so as a project team, we really tried to evaluate, do we have an existing policy? Do we have an existing process where we can facilitate a seamless, less burdensome process to provide data to these individuals? And so tenants, generally, they have their bills, so they're not really asking for their data. Although if they do, we'll provide it for them, no problem. We just need to verify them. Property managers are more likely. We get that a lot, especially in residential, where we have a lot of start-stops. And so we really encourage property managers to be listed as an account holder or as a custodian of the account. We also have a revert to. If there is a default on the account, those folks are listed as a revert to. We do have a lot of third-party bill pay systems. Our commercial accounts use things like Energy Cap. Residential customers have RUBS, which are, bill back systems. And so property managers, they, sometimes they're engaged, sometimes they're not. As we get into the benchmarking ordinance, we start to look at owners of real property, which our code really outlines they are entitled to request that data. But what type of data, how it became an individual onesie-twosie kind of management level approval, which we wanted to push those approvals down to the staff level, or at least to a line manager level rather than to an executive level review. And so the owner was really the area where we are trying to understand a little bit more how we could reduce that burden. And then along those the same lines, third-party contractors. So owners and third-party contractors, we really started to look at them in the same category as releasing that data. So next slide. So we went out and we surveyed, what do people want? What is the data that people want? And is there indeed some type of risk or sensitivity for releasing that data? There's a lot of different types of data and different ways to manipulate data. What type of data are we talking about? What do people want? And so we surveyed our contractor base. We also had the opportunity to talk to a couple building owners that were covered by our benchmarking ordinance to give us some feedback on what kind of data would be beneficial for them. And from that survey, then we used this matrix here for evaluating data sensitivity and risk. And really the sensitivity and risk are across the aggregation, which, number of units or number of tenants, number of customers, number of meters, however you want to think about aggregation, and then also along this timeline as well as an aggregation level. So we do have 15-minute interval data for our electricity. We have 30-minute and 1-hour intervals for our water. And so, we looked across all these different scenarios. And this chart here is from a Department of Energy data access blueprint toolkit. And we used a lot of that for our review as a project team. So next slide. So our data sets that we reviewed that we we thought would be the greatest benefit based on our survey of our customers or those third parties are these different types of data sets, these different types of scenarios and data sets. And then we reviewed this with our cybersecurity team and our data privacy team, talking through those different core provisions around habits of individuals, not releasing personally identifiable information, all sorts of different scenarios around cybersecurity and how that information could be used if it landed into the wrong hands. And so the benchmarking, the average monthly data was really deemed as being the least sensitive, given that analysis of risk and sensitivity. Next slide. And so this is my last slide. So in closing, really what we landed on as being the best benefit of moving forward was establishing a consent management program. And that's really where we started, was rather than making these decisions at an individual staff level, our program now empowers choices of our customer. And so the process is really put into the customer's hands to make the decision on whether or not they want to share that data with the third party. And that relates to our aggregation level, but the consent process is really kind of where we landed. And our program now supports not only participating solar contractors, energy services contractors, but also on the benchmarking side, we support building owners as well. So I'll pause there and pass the baton.
Thanks so much, Kirk. Going to pass the reins over to Emma with I'm going to pass the reins over to Emma here with CenterPoint Energy. She's going to dig into sharing her experiences. Let me pull up your PowerPoint here, Emma, one second.
Sure.
Nope, that's mine.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emma Ingebretson. I'm a program administrator at CenterPoint Energy. I also work within our energy efficiency department, similar to Kirk. It seems like that's where a lot of these benchmarking related efforts are housed. So I manage several energy efficiency programs, including the development and ongoing implementation of our energy data portal, which I am here to talk about today. So I'll talk about kind of how we develop this to help our customers with compliance with benchmarking ordinances that are becoming more common throughout our service territory. I should say I'm up in Minnesota. And also talk about how we are viewing this tool as an opportunity mainly to help our customers and also to advance some of our energy efficiency programs. So you can go to the next slide and then the next slide. So just a bit about benchmarking policy context. This in Minnesota goes all the way back to 2012 when the city of Minneapolis, which is kind of the heart of CenterPoint Energy's service territory, they established a benchmarking ordinance for large commercial buildings, requiring them to submit aggregated data to portfolio manager for benchmarking purposes. In 2019, Minneapolis added multifamily buildings to that ordinance, and they also introduced a time of rent disclosure element to the ordinance. And the large building multifamily element of that ordinance covered about 400 to 500 buildings within the city. And CenterPoint had not developed a tool prior to 2019, but the city really had a goal of being able to add multifamily buildings into their ordinance, and that was really impossible for them to do without some sort of tool to supply aggregated data to portfolio manager. And so CenterPoint committed to building this tool as part of our partnership with the City of Minneapolis and Xcel Energy as part of it's called the Clean Energy Partnership. It's a formalized partnership between the two utilities and the city to advance their climate action plan goals related to energy. And we're seeing other jurisdictions jump on the bandwagon, establishing other or similar benchmarking ordinances. We see that happening in more cities in the future, and there's generally interest in doing benchmarking for other voluntary reasons. Next slide. So to help our customers comply with these ordinances and do the voluntary benchmarking, we decided to build the Energy Data Portal. We went outside of our company to issue a request for proposals, and we selected a third-party developer. They're called Accelerated Innovations to help us build this portal. And the tool was made live just over 2 years ago now. And what the tool does is, take our old process that was cumbersome for customers and solve several different it addresses several different barriers. So instead of getting individual meter data, we are now able to supply aggregated data at the building level. In the old world, we had to get individual customer consent, but we have established a data aggregation policy now that allows us to provide the aggregated data without further consent when certain criteria are met. And then the tool also automatically transfers the data to Portfolio Manager for automated benchmarking data transfer. Next slide. Just a quick overview of our data aggregation policy. We selected the 450 standard. We kind of mirrored Xcel Energy in this regard. The rule says that there needs to be at least 4 accounts within the data set, and no single account can make up more than 50% of the total energy use. So if those 2 criteria are met, we can release the data without further consent. Next slide. So here are several of the features of our portal. I'd say our portal is more towards the, I can't remember the word Jessica used, but the rightmost on her scale, more of a customer interface. At CenterPoint Energy, we do not have a whole lot. We wanted to design a tool that was going to be as much self-service as possible. So we wanted to design a tool that would allow us to not have to handle every single request. And there's some features in the tool that helps us do that, but there are a lot of elements that are automated within the tool, and our data privacy rules are built in, and our data release rules are built into the tool, so that almost all the requests are processed automatically without a person having to supply the data. Here's a screenshot of those consent forms. It's through an email process where if consent is needed, if the data set does not meet that 450 threshold, the owner can request consent from the account holder of the account that's tripping the rule, and the account holder can sign the form online electronically as well. Next slide. That's just a screenshot of the request form. You can go forward. Excuse me. So now just going into some lessons learned. Again, we designed the tool to be as automated as possible to minimize the number of kind of human interactions that are needed to help customers get from A to B. So one consideration, even though as much as you automate things, questions do come up. So one consideration to think of upfront is, how are you going to provide support? Do you want to do it internally, or is that a service that you want to outsource to the, if you do go out to bid for this, to have an outside developer do this for you, some of them might offer support services. For Centerpoint, we opted to do the internal option, partly just to kind of reduce our ongoing costs of administering the tool, but also it does create a bit more visibility for the utility. The person using it feels like they are interacting with Centerpoint Energy when they're using it. A kind of nice hybrid approach is really investing in train the trainer. So Centerpoint has done a lot of work with the cities that are requiring the benchmarking and overlay consulting to, train the people who are the first line of resort for customer questions, and help kind of take the easy questions off the plate of a person behind the scenes who might have to field emails and requests. We have done a lot of work to build tips and instructions within the tool to kind of answer questions before they come up and guide people to the right answer when the question comes up. I've also done some work to build email templates for responses to common issues. And we've done a lot of work in our user guide to kind of help have that be the go-to place for directing people to answers for questions, including an FAQ section. And we've done a lot of documentation of our support processes to help, make repeat questions a little bit more easy to field. Next slide. So this is just a screenshot of our user guide and an example of the instructions that we have directly within the tool as somebody is going through the workflows. Next slide. So I'd like to just wrap this up talking about how we are seeing this tool as an opportunity for customer engagement. So first off, this tool has really been a great way to solve problems for our customers, especially large accounts that have many buildings and accounts that have users who are more interested in their energy use. So for those who have a large portfolio of buildings and are required to do benchmarking, this has been a great way for them to eliminate that monthly manual data entries that a lot of them are doing prior. Secondly, a lot of customers are emailing their key account manager for energy use data on an ongoing basis, and some account managers are better than others at getting that data back to them in a timely manner. So this portal, again, it's that user interface that we're providing. This is a way to give them instant access to that data on an on-demand, ongoing basis. And they've been very appreciative of these options. And one thing that we have been doing lately is doing a little bit more direct support for large customers with large portfolios of buildings, just making it a little bit easier to get their data organized in a way that it makes it easier for them to get set up within the portal. So that's something you can consider. And then finally, going beyond the customer experience, we're definitely looking at this as a way to do promotion and targeted marketing of our energy efficiency programs. So one big benefit is that through this portal, we are collecting a list of contacts who we know that they're engaged in energy efficiency, or at least they're more likely to be than who is typically in the email address that's in our customer information system, which is usually the accounting contact, the person who pays the bill. And Energy Star Portfolio is a treasure trove of building information that we can use to really know, who has a high energy use intensity on the natural gas side. And we can see who has a low energy score or who is really close to getting to the level where they can be Energy Star verified, Energy Star certified, and we can promote our energy efficiency programs to those groups of people. And there's a way within our portal to promote our energy efficiency programs directly through links and widgets. And in the future, we're looking at how we can actually claim savings, energy use savings through our portal. But that is a little bit down the road. We're not quite there yet. So I think that's all I have. Feel free to contact me with any questions or further conversation. Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks so much for sharing. And I didn't mention this earlier, but all of these PowerPoints will be available to you at a later date to revisit. So we can come back to these. Now I'm going to forward the baton over to Tyler here with Excel.
All right, thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. Tyler Carroll. I'm the program manager for the energy benchmarking program at Xcel Energy, similar to my counterparts at Centerpoint and Fort Collins. Our benchmarking program does also fall into our energy efficiency programs and kind of underneath that umbrella as well. So I'm going to be kind of just going through some high level best practices for whole building data aggregation, some tips and tricks, and some lessons learned along the way as we've been doing this for about a little over 4 years now. So just wanted to kind of give some quick, importance of whole building data aggregation points. For a lot of building owners, obtaining individual consent is difficult, if not impossible, especially when looking at, multifamily properties. Whole building data aggregation does give, us as utilities a way to provide that benchmarking data while maintaining customers' data privacy. And, per the Colorado PUC, utilities do have to institute a data privacy policy that follows that 450 standard, which is, becoming very commonplace among other utilities, even aside from Colorado. But basically just 4 or more tenants and no tenant uses more than 50% of that whole building energy usage per fuel type. Next slide, please. So just a couple of quick best practices when implementing a whole building data aggregation strategy. We utilize mapping meters to buildings and not meters to accounts. Ensuring that you're always, utilizing the building owner authorization verification and the 450 rule when it is applicable. At Xcel Energy, when we do this aggregation, we do put it into a monthly calendarized view when it's uploaded into Energy Star. I know that some utilities do it by the customer bill dates. I would say in general, you'll probably save yourself a little bit of less emails and phone calls from customers if you do have it in a format that is similar to what they see on their bill, so that they don't, necessarily run into a bunch of questions when they're looking at their bill and then they're looking at what's in Energy Star and it's not quite the same. And then we do also automate the usage and the billing upload into Energy Star Portfolio Manager just for that ease of use and seamless transition. Next slide. And this is just kind of a quick little graphic of what I was talking about with meters to buildings and not meters to accounts. Just kind of a best practice approach. And then the next slide will also quickly look at automated upload approach as well, with taking that whole building data aggregation and then automatically uploading it into Energy Star Portfolio Manager instead of having to manually do it. Next slide, please. So there are some challenges that will, come into play with whole building data aggregation. Depending on, systems, obviously each utility is different, but it does rely on customer inputs for meter numbers and or addresses. So sometimes there can be some typos or just, the way buildings are set up, they're not quite as clear cut based off of a physical address if that's what you decide to use. So there will be a need for, customer support and an internal team that is monitoring that. It can be a very manual internal process, even with auto upload. I'll go into it a little bit further on the next couple slides, but automating. Oh, sorry, Jess, if you want to just go back. So I would recommend automating as much of that process as you can. But obviously knowing that there still will be a need for some manual intervention in there. And of course, as we all know, technology does not work 100% of the time. So you're going to need kind of a support team to be able to go in and make any sort of data corrections, or there might be some discrepancies or some duplicates. So you'll definitely have to have a support team and, people that are in and out of the program every single day and can kind of correct those issues when they come up. So just a couple of tips and tricks. I would highly recommend, if at all feasible, to have an online portal for building owners to go through and request that whole building data aggregation. It makes your life easier coming from a program management side of view. I mean, I can certainly understand if you have maybe a small handful of building owners where it's fine to just request it through email or phone or something like that. But I would imagine as I do work on a couple other programs besides benchmarking. So I do have, other responsibilities throughout the day, and can certainly be time consuming to sit there and kind of monitor an email inbox for requests or, be answering phone calls. If you don't have any internal resources to kind of make that happen, I would highly recommend utilizing a reputable third-party vendor if the budget allows for it to create that portal. Again, it'll be a seamless customer transition. Everyone's using their phones for everything these days and using the internet so much. So if you can provide something for that, it'll really kind of tie into a great customer experience. And off of that, I would definitely recommend utilizing as many internal resources as possible. If you do have an internal IT staff that you already use to, build and maintain like a My Account platform already, I would highly recommend trying to utilize them and see if they have the capability and capacity to kind of build out a benchmarking portal, whether it be off of your My Account or just on a separate landing page. And I had mentioned it earlier, but a dedicated customer support team is so crucial with benchmarking. You're always, even as Emma mentioned, you can make it as automated as humanly possible, but you're still going to have kind of questions that come up. There's going to be pieces that come along the way, and having, at least a couple people that are dedicated to that customer support will definitely make your life a little easier. And then having a specific email or phone line for customers to use. Xcel Energy has, quite a few general phone lines you can call to get support. But we do have a specific email inbox where you get direct access to our benchmarking team. And it definitely makes a massive difference for our customers to be able to just reach out to someone who knows the system, who can immediately go in and take a look at what's going on or answer a question or send over a user guide if customers are getting stuck along the process. So highly would recommend at least an email that you can, specifically utilize for benchmarking purposes. Continuing with the tips and tricks, I would definitely recommend automating as much of that process as possible. The meter and premise identification, however you decide to, kind of go about that process, whether meters work best or premises, based off your specific systems at your utility. The energy usage and billing usage aggregation off of that first point. So if you can automate that as well, and then like Emma mentioned, they have a online kind of a CUD form request or a request to get that aggregation data. So if you can have an online, version of that in some way, shape, or form, would highly recommend that. Xcel Energy currently still does utilize a PDF format that you do have to submit to an authorization team. So it does at times kind of add a little bit to the process. So if you can kind of streamline that, it'll definitely make for a better customer experience when they're requesting that data. And engaging internal stakeholders who are involved in the process constantly, I know has been a big thing for us, just making sure with Excel, we have a few different departments that kind of work in our process. So, we're constantly engaging with them just to, keep them updated on how our queue is filling up, kind of what the quantity is looking like, what our workload is looking like, and then kind of making sure that all teams are reading the same sheet of music so that the process runs smoothly. And, certainly allow for flexibility in the process and iterate as you go. Don't make it a simple concrete process that, if it doesn't work out, it's really, really hard to change. I would definitely, as you're building out a benchmarking program, allow, whether it's in your platform building or whether it's just in your processes or your support team, just to have a little bit of flexibility so that as you, start to engage in the process and you're getting feedback from customers, that you can continue to do things that are working really well for you, and you can also adjust and shift when you need to if things aren't. And finally, just some final thoughts and kind of key learnings. Definitely creating some customer support documents that walk your customers through the process are super helpful. I know Emma mentioned that in her presentation as well, but having a dedicated user guide, where your customers can see how to set up properties, connect their accounts, even do things in Energy Star. I highly recommend putting screenshots in there. All of that will make your life easier, and your customers will certainly appreciate a reference guide to use. Frequently asked question resource, either on a web portal or having a PDF that you can simply send, is also very helpful, and have that readily accessible. That way, if questions do pop up, you can kind of eliminate as much need for a phone call or an email as possible. Functional, easy to navigate web platforms are very critical to customer satisfaction. So, you always kind of have to be looking at this from a customer lens when you're building this out. You obviously have to utilize your resources, whatever those might look like for your particular situation. But always keep in mind that you need to have a customer service mindset, be looking at it from a customer lens, because at the end of the day, this plays directly into customer service, and that's, ultimately who we're trying to serve and help here. So, and I say it once, I'll say it a million times, make sure to engage all internal and external stakeholders if you utilize any sort of vendors in the process as much as possible. Engage the, other cities, engage the state, whoever it is that you're working with in regards to benchmarking, just keep them informed. It's kind of a team effort, as you'll certainly realize as you go through the process. So definitely make sure that the communication flow is efficient and everyone's reading the same sheet of music. So that's kind of all I had. I figured I'd keep it short and sweet. So.
Thank you, Tyler. Very helpful. I think overall, the idea of today's session was to provide a better idea of how this can be applicable to any organization, showing a bunch of different options, kind of how this plays out, applying it in real life. I know we don't have as much time as we were hoping for questions, but I have made myself available longer than the hour for anybody who does also have that extra time and wants to stick around. But without further ado, let's jump right into Q&A, see what we can get answered for questions here. And pull up the chat here and see what we have. Ultimately, though, happy to have this be kind of more of a open session. Anyone's more than welcome to jump in. I see we have a question here from Karen.
So Jessica, the question would be, as we're initiating this, I'm hearing talk about two pieces of data, usage and billing. Is the reporting that these buildings are going to need to do initially just for usage?
Yes. So overall whole building usage for the previous year. So they'll need a full year's worth of data. If they're reporting this year, it would be a full year's worth of 2020 data for their whole building.
But as we're looking at the legislation, we're thinking this would not start until 2022, which means they'd be reporting 2021 data.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like we have another question here from Jacqueline.
Hi, thanks, Jessica. I have two questions. One, I know you guys shared in one of the prior meetings the spreadsheet for uploading, and one of the columns says estimation. I just didn't know if you guys could share what estimation meant in those columns, as far, because I understand the rest, start date, end date, usage, cost is optional, but then it says estimation. So I just didn't know what that meant.
Yeah, estimation would just be if there was any estimation on the utility side of that data. So should there be, for whatever reason, an estimated usage reading, maybe you couldn't get to that meter that month, or they're set up on an estimated readings type of format where it's quarterly and resolved at a later date. It would just be if the data provided wasn't the actual metered data, it was an estimation provided by the utility.
Okay. And then my other question is just what the status is of the building data, if you guys have gotten that information yet, or if you know kind of when you might get it. I know from what Tyler's presentation was, that's great, putting together, the customer service pieces and doing the, having, the IT build all of that. But if we only have 15 buildings in our service territory, that might not make a whole lot of sense. But if we kind of have a better handle on how many people we're going to have to be serving through this portal, that might, help us understand that a little better.
Sure. Yeah. So we are working to pull together that covered buildings list. And I think over the next couple of months that should be finalized. Right now, it's just kind of working with the tax assessors in those areas to collect as much data as possible and sort through it to make sure we're publishing the proper number of buildings that fit under what's required for the bill. So we will get that out to you as soon as we know it. If you know, essentially, you could take a quick estimate if you do have a small amount of customers in that fall within the range. You probably don't need to go the efforts of creating a whole portal for requesting, and could probably come up with some sort of internal process for accepting emails, or maybe an online form even, to collect that, just to cut down on the time.
And just to follow up on that, we are shooting to have that list available and probably 99% accuracy by March 31st.
Great.
So again, we're just waiting for a handful of assessor departments and counties to get us information back so we can publish it at a statewide basis.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll pull up real quick our upcoming schedule. So upcoming schedule includes our next session in March, where we're going to go over the standardization of data disclosure, discussing in a little bit more technical detail auto upload versus spreadsheet options for getting owners their whole building aggregated data. We're going to have the EPA as a guest speaker for this section, and they'll dig into their web services and the ability to connect your utilities with the EPA Energy Star Portfolio Manager benchmarking tool in order to set up and establish that auto upload, as well as dig into the spreadsheet that customers can use to directly upload into that tool, or just manually enter in their data from, to make that process a little bit more streamlined on their end. So we'll dig into those details a little bit deeper next session. And then in terms of our follow-ups, we'll dig into more of how to identify that data, best practices for disclosure, funding options, data system options, and then June 16th is still flexible. Open to recommendations from any of you on what you want to see and what would be helpful to discuss that month. So that's what's coming up on the radar for us over these next few sessions. Any other questions today? It looks like we have a question here about Fort Collins pushing financial data to portfolio manager. Oh, nope, maybe that was just a comment.
Just a comment. We separate all our consumption data from financial data, and that kind of helped our program a little.
Mary's wondering when they're voting on the bill. Kim, do you have any updates on that?
You know, it hasn't yet been introduced, so I am not quite sure. So maybe sometime next week it'll get introduced and into the committee.
I do know right now they're working around the language of tenant and accounts that we've been previously discussing, so hopefully we'll have some updates there as well.
Yeah, as well as a few other changes they have to make.
Great. Well, I appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you so much to our guest speakers. I hope this provided a bigger overview in terms of what the possibilities are and how there are so many different ways and directions we can take this to work in your benefit as a utility company, gathering information on your customers, pursuing marketing, promoting energy efficiency programs, and ultimately providing a good customer service platform in order for this to all work seamlessly between you as well as the customer. So please let us know if you have any other questions. Feel free to reach out to myself or anybody else involved. We can get you some more information on any of these other programs. If you'd like, we will be releasing the recording of this session as well as the documents from it, PowerPoints, and meeting minutes in the next few days. So keep an eye out for those. Those will be posted on the Colorado Energy Office's website. And again, I appreciate your time and excited to see you all next month. Bye. Thanks, everyone.